right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Sea Deer Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We're really excited for today's event. We always love these opportunities to connect with the crew from Hearts in the Ice, who are on just an amazing mission, an amazing expedition in Svalbard. So in 2019-2020, Sunniva Sorby and Hilda Strom made history when they became the first women to overwinter in Svalbard solo. They spent 12 months at the remote trapper's cabin called Bamsebu, located at 78 degrees north and 140 kilometers from the nearest town of Longyearbyen in Svalbard. So climate change is not taking a break, so neither are they. They return to Svalbard in November and will be overwintering at Bamsebu until May of 2021. So together with a team of 10 global partners, Hearts in the Ice is a bridge between science and global citizens to better understand climate change and why we all need to be doing our part. So they will continue to serve as citizen scientists on a variety of projects, from observing clouds and auroras to flying drones to monitor ice and collecting phytoplankton samples as they build on their second year of data collection. So we're really excited to have them joining live via satellite phone right now from Bamsebu. Hilda and Sunniva, how are you doing today?
Hey, everybody. We're doing great. Thank you.
All right. Well, it's great to have you joining in live with us. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit and get us caught up. I'm also going to share my screen because we have a couple cool images that you shared with me as well.
Yes, that's great. So this is Hilda and Sunniva, and we're now up at this remote cabin, as Joe just told you about. It's actually close to the North Pole. And up here, we can see that the climate change has a great impact. Last winter, when we were here, it was more sort of a normal winter. But this winter, we see how things are changing. We've had rain this winter, and that is not good news for the reindeers because the tundra is covered by ice. It's like a skating area, the whole area down here. And it's so mild, so we don't have any ice. And the polar bears, as you know, they need ice in order to get to their food source, which is seal. So we actually are outside here doing stuff for the scientists. We are collecting data, and we walk around this hut, even though it's absolutely, completely pitch black outside. It's not. We don't see anything. But we actually have a little equipment with us. It's a night vision scope with an infrared sort of a thing that we can see in the dark. So I don't know, Joe, maybe you can show the picture of Sunniva and the two reindeers, the black and white picture. And those two reindeers are actually quite close to Sunniva, but it wouldn't be impossible for us to see it with our headlamps or without this scope. So that is two reindeers that's trying to find their food through a layer of ice. So it's kind of dramatic to see. And last winter, we had a huge polar bear coming into the hut or into this area and had a close encounter with our dog, Etta, just outside here. And it was a huge polar bear, and I think it's more than 600 kilos. And when we're talking about they, it's the scientists and people like Polar Bear International that's on the call here. They have track of many of the polar bears in our area. So maybe you can show also the picture of the two polar bears that we saw through our scope, and that's 4 days ago. So they are close by, but we usually don't see them. And we haven't had anyone up on our doorstep yet. But it's dark, Sunniva, and what are we doing when it's so mild and so different this year?
Hey, everybody. Just a quick little update from Sunniva here. Thanks, Hilda. And we are sitting like side by side on this couch in this tiny 20 square meter trapper's cabin. And it is mild, as she said, outside. But I don't know if all of you can relate being tucked away in small places with all this isolation that we're all having to go through with COVID. We recently said yes to a team of 3 psychologists that actually wanted to study probably how crazy we are. Like, why are you going back there for a second year? but also study our isolation and coping. Like, how do we live in such a small place, just the two of us? So that's a new thing for us this year. And because we have an open fjord out there, guess what we did the other day? And Joe, I think I sent you a picture of this with our kayaks. We pulled out ordered kayaks, and we put some Christmas lights around, because there's nothing to see out there except black. And I don't know, I have a little bit of a fear of the dark on the being in the water. But we collect them plastic. It's a very interesting thing to do in the polar night, because they're not sure if the phytoplankton bloom without sunlight. So we've been doing that. We also have flown our drone on its pre-programmed flights. And we've also, because there is so much sort of open sea here, it brings with it in the surf tons of garbage, plastic bottles, netting. We have a picture of us pulling up some netting too, and just lots of plastic. So we've been collecting that in addition to the drone and the phytoplankton. And then, of course, photography with the aurora. We had an amazing northern night display last night up here. And I'll just answer a quick question that somebody asked a little bit ago. Why in the world is it so dark up here 24/7? And for many of you on the call right now, I'm sure you know what darkness is, but you probably get the sunrise and the sunset every day. And we don't up here until February. So from November to February, the sun is actually below 6 degrees, or 6 degrees below the horizon, and it doesn't actually come up this far north. So we're in what they call the polar night, which is why headlamps, spotting scopes, and safety gear like our flare gun and things like that are super important when we're out there with the polar bears in this world. And just to hand it over now to Polar Bears International, and we are so grateful to Canada Goose for hosting this month, and for you, Joe. You are just our resident rock star, and you look great having shaved your mustache. I saw you before. And the team, KT and Joanna and BJ from Polar Bears International, thank you guys so much.
All right, good stuff. Well, thank you for that great update. And yes, Movember did come to an end, so the mustache is gone. But it's great to be catching up, and I'm really excited now to introduce our experts who are joining us from Polar Bears International. So let me bring them in here quickly. There we go. All right, good stuff. And we want to make sure we do a little spotlight action there. There we go. So today joining us, we've got tech guru BJ Kirschhoffer joining us. So he ensures the smooth working of Polar Bear International's field operations, from maternal den studies in Svalbard and Alaska to live tundra connection webcasts, which link scientists in the field with people all over the world. And we're also excited to be joined by Joanna Sulich today. So she is a biologist with the Norwegian Polar Institute and works on the polar bear denning project with Polar Bear International. And I do want to give a special shout out to KT Miller, who's providing us with the amazing photo and video action behind the scenes. So BJ and Joanna, it's so great to have you joining us live today. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit, and then we'll get to some Q&A action with everybody.
Well, it's nice to be here with you and all the classrooms, and it's also nice to be here with Hilda and Sineva. It's so exciting to be able to speak with you, especially since you're in such a remote location. We want to give a quick shout out to Canada Goose for sponsoring this month as well. They're a big sponsor of our organization too, and really help us conduct our work both on the education front and on the research front. So they're a fantastic company. Our mission statement at Polar Bears International is to conserve polar bears and the sea ice they depend on. And that's really kind of the most important takeaway. If you were to learn one thing today, it's that polar bears need sea ice to survive. And you got a great picture of one right here, walking around on some sea ice. Maybe this wouldn't be quite prime polar bear habitat. There's a lot of open water there. This might be a little better polar bear habitat, but this is what they need to survive. A lot of pictures do show polar bears on land, and maybe potentially Hilda and Sineva will see polar bears on land, but that's not really where they want to be. They want to be on the sea ice where they can catch their food, they can meet their mates, and they can raise their young. So we'll be coming back to some of that here later on. Excuse me. But we're really happy to be connecting with you today, and I want to let Joanna take over a little bit. Joanna, if I can say, we met her several years ago as she was a student of Jan Arsch over at the Norwegian Polar Institute working on her master's thesis. And she came on our maternal den study project, which we'll be talking about today. And she has been an absolute pleasure to work with, an expert in the field. And since then, she's worked not only in the far north, but also in the far south in Antarctica with MPs. So we're super lucky to have her. And Joanna, take it away.
Hi, thanks, BJ. I'm very excited to be here today and to talk to you about the study that we are conducting in Svalbard. And it's also very exciting to be with Sunniva and Hilda, who are there at the moment, and they are experiencing the darkness of the polar night. So you can imagine that for polar bears, like, it also is a challenging time. So we can only admire polar bears even more when we hear about the difficulties of experiencing a full year in Svalbard. So the admiration for the adaptations of polar bears is even greater when we can really hear the experiences of people who are out there. But maybe I should tell you a little bit about what polar bears are doing at the moment right now. So Svalbard, as you can see here on the map, it's a very important habitat for polar bears. So it's located in the Arctic Circle, far up north when the sea ice is reaching. So as BJ was saying, polar bears depend on sea ice, and they need sea ice to hunt seals. And Svalbard was a perfect environment for that. For a lot of time, it had a lot of sea ice, a lot of seals. Other animals were roaming around, so polar bears could eat walrus. They could eat some white whales or narwhals, or occasionally feast on dead whale carcass that was washing ashore. And the bears don't really need to hibernate. They just go around and get their food. But polar bear moms, on the other hand, they really need to go into a den. So they dig a warm maternity den in the snow in the late autumn. And somewhere around time right now, they are giving birth to, like, on average, 2 very small cubs. And they remain together in that den for a long period, all the way until spring. And they emerge from those dens in March and April. So Svalbard is an important place for polar bears. It's also a very important place for moms and cubs. And we are trying to look into what they are actually doing when they're out there. So in Svalbard, as Sunniva and Hilda mentioned, it can be very dry, and there is a little snow. So polar bears need places where snow accumulates. So if the snow is falling on land and then it's carried with wind, if it's stopped by mountains, it creates the blown areas where the snow accumulates and remains throughout the year. And those places are hard to find out on the sea ice, but when it's on land and there's mountains like here in Svalbard, polar bears really depend on those mountain chains to find suitable snow patches and dig a den and get there in the hilly terrain to dig their den. I can. I don't know, BJ, why I can ask you, why did you choose? I know that the study that I'm taking part of now was happening in North America beforehand, but why did you choose Svalbard to expand the study?
That's a really good question. I think before we dive into why Svalbard, I think we can tie this a little bit into Hilda and Sunniva, in that in order to really understand a species, you have to watch it. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I mean, Hilda and Sunniva are out there in the environment, being witnesses to what's happening in the far north, and I think that's really important. How would we know? How can we talk about? How can we communicate that there's no sea ice if there aren't people studying it, if there aren't people watching it. So I think that's super important, and I think it kind of transfers over to the Den project as well. How do we know what's happening with polar bears? Well, we have to watch them somehow. This project started, like Joanna says, over in North America, in northern Alaska. It's a place that's very, very different than Svalbard. Northern Alaska is like someone took a giant iron and flattened the entire landscape. It's a very, very cold place, typically, or it used to be in the wintertime. And the place is so flat, when you're riding a snowmobile, you can't even tell when you've moved from the land onto the frozen ocean. It is just one big white flat plain. It is unbelievable how flat it is there. And so finding dens there is so difficult. The polar bears like to den in something even as small as a bluff that's behind something that's 2 meters tall. It is so subtle. What ended up happening is that we started to run out of dens to look at because of a mix of troubles with putting out radio collars on the polar bear dens because of climate change and funding. We just had less and less bears that we could study. So we started to reach out to some of our partners, and Norwegian Polar Institute said, yeah, we could work together on this. And so with the San Diego Zoo involved, Dr. Megan Owen, we moved to Svalbard. And as well that there's huge mountains in Svalbard. This is the environment that Hilda and Synnøve are in. And so we had to learn a lot. This is one of our early systems in Svalbard. And oh man, it's too big. To move this around mountains, next to impossible, where in Alaska, it's no problem because there wasn't even a hill to really contend with. So, so that's why we moved it, is because we really kind of had to. We needed to have bears to study, and the Norwegian Polar Institute has a very, very good program of putting radio collars onto bears and studying bears. And so we were able to work with them to not only use their expertise and their people, but work with their people, but also work with the bears that they study. So maybe, Joanna, we could talk a little bit about what it actually takes to put this equipment out there.
Sure.
Now that we've worked together so long, what is it like to prepare for a departure, for instrumenting a polar bear den? What do we do?
Oh, as you said, it's very difficult to find a polar bear. So I would say that the job of finding a den starts in spring, when Jon Ors, together with Magnus from Norwegian Polar Institute, they venture each spring out in the sea ice to find polar bears, to trap them, and then do all the necessary measurements and fit them with the telemetry collars. And telemetry collars work a little bit like our cell phones, so they are programmed to collect and then send the position of a bear together with other measurements, and they send it to the scientist directly. So since spring, we know that there are bears out there in the ice, and we know exactly where they are. So when the time when the time comes, and next autumn and winter, we can start really mapping the dens that we see the polar bears go into. And then we can start together with collecting the equipment and programming the cameras. We can start putting a plan together. And BJ showed you a picture earlier of a big white bear-proof box, which held the camera inside. And since then, the technology that BJ is working on changed a lot. So we're now working with cameras that fit into much smaller bear-proof boxes, or at least we're hoping they're bear-proof. Here you can see BJ and myself checking the final settings before we leave the camera open. Camera will be closed, but it will be on and recording a bear den that we found. So yes, we are finding the bears, we are programming the cameras, we are fitting them in boxes, we are preparing all of the equipment ahead of time in a warmth of a nice shelter. we are running a test beforehand, and then we go out with snow scooters or helicopters, and we ski to the closeness of the den. We try to be as quiet as possible and as fast as possible. We leave our equipment when we all that we practiced setting up, and then we make sure that everything's working and leave the place as fast as possible, because the last thing we want to do is to bother bears on when we try to see, they're in the most vulnerable time of their life in the polar bear den.
Yeah, I think that's a good description. It's a lot of preparations and a lot of checklists, a lot of practicing to make sure we can work together as a team, as an effective team, so that we can, when we get to the site, we can work quickly so we don't disturb the bears, and then we get out of there as soon as possible. So it is a lot of preparations, and then it seems like it takes about 5 hours for us to be dropped off, find the den actually in the snow, and set everything up and ski away. The 5 hours goes by in just a blink of an eye. It is, it feels like 30 minutes. It goes by so quick. Everybody's working so hard and so quickly. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. And I think actually one thing we want to share with you today is what the cameras see. So this is really the key to the whole thing here, where if you look here, this is a time-lapse video of one of the bears in Svalbard, and you can see the tracks building. It's very small and it moves really quickly. But this is a polar bear that came out of her den. She didn't bring her cubs with on the first time, but then she's probably just trying to get away from her kids for a little while. Hard to say, but she's just been in a snow hole for maybe 2.5 months, 2 months with her kids, and she's like, I need to get out of here for a minute. So you can see that she's made some tracks. Maybe she's dug another little den here, almost like a day bed. She's probably spending a lot of time rolling around. We also know they spend a lot of time looking. Now that she's revealed where she is, she's making tracks and she's opened her den, she spends a lot of time looking for danger, because really the most dangerous thing to polar bears is other polar bears. So these are the things that we're actually interested in. The whole reason for setting these cameras up is to help us describe what do they do at the den site. How many cubs do they have? How big are the cubs? How much time do they spend at the den site? All those sorts of things. And it seems kind of basic, but if nobody's there to watch, how do we know what normal is? How do we know what things should be like? And how can we tell what a change is? So maybe, Joanna, I hope I'm not springing this question on you here, but why is this project important for bear conservation? Can you help us maybe a bit on that?
Sure. So I think we've touched on it briefly beforehand, how different the environment in Svalbard is from, let's say, Hudson Bay. So polar bears are a species that live all across the Arctic. And as we know, they depend on sea ice, but sea ice conditions around the world, they change from area to area. And Svalbard is a place where the sea ice loss is almost twice as fast as in other places where polar bears live. So the environment in Svalbard changes dramatically, and dramatically fast as well. So looking at polar bear denning in Svalbard and looking at how moms and cubs really cope with those changes at the moment can help us understand, in general, the challenges that the polar bear species faces in the future. So having a good understanding of polar bear ecology throughout their range around the world is really crucial if we want to understand what is absolutely necessary for effective conservation of the species. So the better we understand the bears, the better we know how they're doing out there, especially in such an important time when they're giving birth and raising their kids, the better we can protect them.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. You really do have to understand something if you want to know how to take care of it and how to protect it. So yeah, and I think the future of this project is really to try to continue on. We consider this project long-term monitoring. And really, for us to see changes, we need to look over a long period of time. I think this year will be, I think it's our 5th or 6th year. We're hoping for maybe 10 or more. So to continue on the same work, also continue innovating. Like Joanna says, we built the cameras. We're building cameras in order to do this work because we didn't find anything off the shelf that was, fit the needs that we had. So I think we'll continue looking at better ways and less invasive ways. Easier ways to get data without disturbing the bears. And I think that's important to us. So yeah, we're looking forward to more time in the cold with frozen fingers.
It's BJ said it's going to be 5 hours out there in the field, but I'm telling you this, we are so engaged in the whole thing that we are starting to feel the cold, like by the very end when we're waiting for a pickup. It's very exciting, and each year is bringing so much more information and more innovation that can be used not only for polar bear science but used in other animals. So it's really the work that's being done here. I think it's taking research on animals and observation research in a great, exciting new direction.
All right, very cool. Well, Joanna and BJ, thank you so much for sharing the, that amazing work that you're doing. The footage looks incredible. It's funny to watch it kind of sped up and see the tracks in the snow. We did have a quick question I want to slide in on YouTube. Once the cameras are in place, do you have any control over them at all, or are they pretty kind of locked in place?
That's a really good question. And, I think in an ideal world, we would have control, or potentially maybe in the future, they'll control themselves. Maybe we'll use some motion detection and some AI built in to help it motor itself. We aren't there yet. The place, Svalbard, is so far north. It's actually pretty amazing that Hilda and Sinnova are able to get a telephone connection out. I mean, to have streaming internet to make your camera work and see what it's doing is very difficult and also very, very expensive. So no, we can't control them yet, but our goal is to potentially in the future make the cameras so they can control themselves. Fingers crossed.
All right, very cool. Well, what do you say? Let's meet some classrooms and get a little Q&A action going.
Let's do it.
All right, very cool. So I do, let's fix that there. There we go. I do have Hilda and Sinnova still with us via satellite phone. So Hilda and Sinnova, maybe just before we jump into a little Q&A action, why don't you tell us a little bit about, we saw some great pictures last year where you saw the big prints out in the snow. And I know you had more than kind of a dozen visitors at different times. What's that like to be in the cabin, such a small cabin, so remote, and have those big visitors coming to your door?
Yeah, great question. My first, this is Sinnova, and Hilda's been living up here for 25 years, so she's seen her fill of polar bears. And my first polar bear up here was in August when we were actually getting all our supplies organized for our official stay here in September. And he was the largest bear in the area, around 600 kilos, but he was just walking up the hill and then went over the hill, and that was it. That was August. And then fast forward to October, a polar bear was right on the side of the hut, and I turned on, we have satellite, we have solar panel and windmill here for power, and I turned on the light outside to go and close our wooden
We just lost them. So we may lose them from time to time. The satellite connection, like PJ mentioned, it's not easy to connect from somewhere so far north. The curvature of the earth definitely doesn't help. So we're going to start grabbing some questions, and I'm sure they're going to call back within a moment, and we'll continue our discussion. I do want to say we've got classrooms joining us across Canada. So I see some classrooms are already shouted out from British Columbia, from Alberta and Ontario. I see some classrooms in the US and Colorado, Arizona, and New York. We even have groups in the chat. I can see Germany and India. So it's great to have such a diverse group kind of in here with us. So I think, Hilda and Sinnova, we got you back.
Yep, sorry about that. We're back, and I'm not sure where I got cut off there, but I was just, maybe you can tell me.
Yeah, absolutely. You just flicked the light on when you had your visitor.
Okay, keeping you all in suspense. I turned the light to go outside and close the shutters, and he appeared right to my right and was literally no more than 2 feet away. And I tell you, we both love, they're magnificent marine mammals. They're beautiful. They deserve our love and attention and protection. And when you're that close to them, you can't help but have your heart in your throat in that very moment. It was really close. We've had over 53 polar bear encounters this last winter, including being able to spot one that the Norwegian Polar Institute is tracking, N26131. She's been given a name because she had a collar. And can we just tell you what a privilege it was for us to spot her with a newborn in April? So she gave December, she would have been about 15 kilos, and not just 4 months. And then to our surprise, we see the same female coming here at Bamsebu, showing up on Hilda's birthday, July 13th. And she had just come out of the water, and sadly she was without cubs. So we've seen high highs and high lows, and just how precious and privileged these moments of observation are. And I'll pass it to Hilda. She had something to share about some conditions up here.
Yeah, no, it's really changing, and I have, as Sunniva said, been here for 25 years and been down to this hut so many times and seen a lot of polar bears and have close encounters. But it's also a good thing to see that those that we have seen have seen quite in okay conditions. We see that they still come with cubs, and some of them survive. We had this one huge polar bear on our doorstep in November last year. It's the same one as Sunniva mentioned. It's according to Joanna, it's probably more than 600 kilos, which is approximately as big as this hut. So it's huge. And we are, of course, now very worried about conditions for the ice. We have some snow, and hopefully the female polar bears in the area that are going to give birth do find an area where they can dig a den. And we know of a place not so far away from this hut that is a regular spot for a den. And we're not scientists, so we keep our distance way far from that. But hopefully Jonas and people from Polar Bear International will find out that we have more polar bears giving birth in this area this coming winter, or now soon, actually, in a few weeks from now.
All right, good stuff. That sounds exciting. Okay, well, let's start bringing some classrooms in. First, I want to give a shout out. We've got a crew joining us from Kamloops, and they are third graders. Their camera's not cooperating, but they're here in the call. So they're going to send us a few questions via the chat. So I'm going to keep my eye out for those. Let's go to some fourth graders in Glenview, Illinois with Miss Michael. I'm going to bring Miss Michael into the call here. Hey, Miss Michael, how you doing?
Hi, I have Emma who has a question for you. Emma, speak loudly so they can hear you. My class is
How long is the average life of a polar bear?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so, polar bear, we like to say polar bears in zoos and aquariums. They have a really good healthcare program. They've got vets looking after them. The longest polar bear known to have lived was Debbie in the Winnipeg Zoo up in Canada, in Manitoba, and she lived to be 42 years old. That's a pretty old bear. But in the wild, they don't live quite as long. The females live a little bit longer than the males. They have a pretty hard life. They have to fight for their girlfriends. So females can live into their late 20s pretty easily, and then the males in kind of their mid to early 20s.
All right, great question to kick things off. Let's jump to another classroom now. This time, let's come back to Canada. Miss Holden's crew is in Spruce Grove, Alberta. Let's bring them in live. There we go. Hey, Mrs. Holden.
Hi there. We are wondering, are there different kinds of polar bears, or are they all the same?
That is a good question, and I think it's something that's been asked over and over, since the polar bears live all around. They live in Svalbard, they live in Siberia, they live in Alaska and northern Canada and in Greenland. And although they're divided in different subpopulations around the world, they all tend to be pretty similar. And that is because polar bears live in similar conditions all across the Arctic, and they're also facing similar challenges all throughout. So they are polar bears that are part of different subpopulations due to the place in which they live, and they do live in different conditions. So that's very flat in Hudson Bay and very mountainous in Svalbard. There's a little more ice in some areas, and it's melting faster in others, but it's all polar bear. It's the same species all throughout.
All right. I'm going to switch over to YouTube here. We've got so huge shout out to all the groups on YouTube. We've got lots of questions coming in, a great discussion. Mrs. Clark has Cassie in her class, and they're wondering about polar bear swimming. How great of a distance can they cover? And are they able to actually dive down and hold their breath a little bit?
Oh man, those are great questions.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, Joanna, do you know how deep they can swim? Yes,
so the polar bears, they can swim for hundreds of kilometers, and it is a very it's harder for them to swim than it is to walk. So they do use a lot of energy when swimming, but they do carry a lot of energy on them if the conditions are right. So they can really swim for hundreds of kilometers, and these are some of the ways that polar bears resolve to in order to go far distances and go from one ice patch to another. But another thing is that they're very agile hunters, and they approach every hunting situations differently and in a unique way, using best of their opportunities. So the callers that I was talking about earlier, they managed to record the depth of diving as well. So the polar bear is usually swimming on the surface and comfortably moving along with its strong paws, but from time to time it can dive really deep. And scientists recorded that it's almost over 10 meter deep dive, and that is believed to do with the way the polar bear is hunting. So if that was an ice float on which a seal would be resting, a polar bear can do a neat move where they can, let's imagine that the seal is facing away from me. Polar bear can come and dive underwater away from the seal, go all the way down, and use this buoyancy that it has to just plop out of the water right in front of the seal and grab it. So they usually swim on the surface, and they can do it for many kilometers, but they do occasionally really dive deep down and use it to get the momentum and grab the seal.
All right, very, very cool. And a great question from YouTube. Let's take a little trip to British Columbia. Look at this crew we got hanging out with us.
Whoa.
In Kelowna. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Let's get that mic unmuted so we can say hi.
Hello.
There they are. Hey, boys and girls.
Okay, Luke, where's your question? Why is this?
Oh, we lost
it again.
Why does? He wants to know why the sea ice is disappearing.
Perfect.
Oh, wow. That is a really good question. So, sea ice is disappearing because of emissions, greenhouse gases that people are emitting in our everyday lives. And really, it's things from the airplanes that fly to the cars that drive to some places where the energy is produced using coal or other things that are burnt. These gases are emitted and build almost like a blanket over the atmosphere, over the Earth. It's this invisible blanket up there. And we need a little bit of blanket to keep the Earth warm, but the blanket is getting thicker than we need. And so the Earth is getting warmer and the ice is melting because of that? That's a very good question.
Yeah, and Hilda and Sunniva, you're kind of seeing a little bit of that firsthand with the warmer temperatures you're experiencing right now.
Yes, we absolutely are. And it's interesting, to your point, BJ, with white reflects the sunlight back into the atmosphere naturally. And without ice, it's actually the oceans are absorbing a lot of that heat, which just has this really negative impact on our entire ecosystem. And right now, December 10th, and there is no ice in the fjord. That was very different from last year. Last year was a big sea ice year, but this year is more a reflection of the trend of diminishing sea ice.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the sea ice maps for the Barents Sea, and it looks like the sea ice is a long ways away from Svalbard as well, which is sad to see.
Yeah, wow. Oh yeah, it's a scary development, and well, we need the ice to come back. We need to do some. We need all to be thoughtful users and do whatever we can in our own lives in order to prevent this to escalate. We need to get the temperature down and the ice back.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We have Mrs. Ross's 4th and 5th graders joining us in Ontario. I see someone nice and up front for us. How you doing, bud?
Hi. So, I have a question. Have you ever seen a polar bear that has been hurt or something like that? Hurt?
That's a good question. When Joanna and I are in the field working on the project that we just described, we don't see very many bears. In fact, if we see a bear, we're maybe not doing something right. Other places in the Arctic where we've worked, we have on occasion seen evidence of bears being hurt in scar tissue, places where the skin is exposed. But polar bears, believe it or not, a healthy polar bear can heal pretty well. Especially the males, they can lead a pretty tough life. They do a lot of sparring, is what we call it, but it looks like wrestling. But of course, they have really sharp teeth and claws, and they fight pretty hard when it comes to mating season. But they also, like I say, a healthy polar bear can do pretty well at healing itself. So on occasion, we do see hurt bears, but it's more of evidence from being hurt in the past. I don't know if Joanna, if you have other experience from your time in Svalbard.
Yeah, there was actually this summer when I was on holidays and I was taking a long hike on the western side of Svalbard. I had seen a bear by the end of my trip that was had a little wound on its snout. So it was very recognizable. It was a bear that was not hurt badly. It had a scratch, a big scratch that was healing. But that scratch allowed me to later track this bear through photos of friends or people that I could find that could spot the bear from their boats, and I could see a little bit of a history of that bear. So that bear was also captured by an automatic camera set by Norwegian Polar Institute, and it was also spotted eating eggs at bird cliffs. So thanks to this little wound of the bear in a very recognizable place, or like very easily, it was seen very easily. That bear became recognizable, and I could track its life history that summer a little bit.
Okay, very cool. I'm going to jump to another question here. This is from grade 3s in Kamloops. And so polar bears, they're successful sometimes when they hunt, sometimes they're not. But in an ideal world, they've got to catch. How much are they going to eat in a day? How much is maybe a mother polar bear going to eat?
Before we jump into the question, I just want to say that Kamloops is the hometown of Elisa McCall, one of PBI's scientists. She's a fantastic communicator and a polar bear scientist. She's from Kamloops, so you have someone very famous from your town. on the PBI staff. You should definitely check her out on our website. But yes, polar bears on average need to eat about 1 seal a week. But it's not that they get 1 seal every week. It's not like every Monday they get a seal. Polar bears kind of work almost like you could imagine your cell phone battery. It would be a really big battery. And when they can eat, they eat as much as they can. So they're kind of recharging that battery. And then when they don't find food, they sort of deplete that battery. And they go from really fat to skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And then when they find the seals again, they fatten up again. So on average, they need, over the course of a year, about 1 ring seal per week. But that might come in springtime and when they're on the sea ice. And then during the summertime, they may not eat for months at a time. In fact, the female polar bears can go through a fasting period that would last up to 8 months. Can you imagine not eating for 8 months? If they're healthy enough, they can coast for this long in order to give birth to their cubs in that little den, come out, and then go find seals again. And that could take up to 8 months. So amazing animals.
Oh, absolutely, 8 months. That's incredible. Let's see. We haven't been to Miss Matternal's group. They are in Alberta. How are we doing today? Grade 5?
Good. What will happen? What will happen if a polar bear meets another polar bear, specifically a male?
That is a great question, and it depends, of course, when the polar bears meet and if they want to meet each other or not. But when we talk about moms and cubs, we can think of a female that she really wants to meet other bears only when she needs to find a dad of her cubs, and that is sometime in the spring when she's out in the sea ice. Then she is looking forward to see a male and meet a male, and then mate with him, so she can become pregnant and then have cubs later. But when she has cubs already, and when she is going into the den or staying into the den, then she really does everything she can to stay away and steer away from those males. Because meeting one could be a very dangerous thing. They could hurt and kill her cubs, or they could hurt and kill her. So some bad things could happen for her if she met a big hungry male. But so what she wants is to make sure that the environment in which she goes with her children is safe. And a polar bear have amazing sense of smell, and quite all right eyesight as well. So she's using really all the senses she can to scan her environment and to steer away from males for the time being.
All right. Well, Hilda and Sunniva, what I love about Hearts in the Ice is how you've pulled together just such a great crew from all over the world supporting what's happening. So, for instance, Canada Goose making these events possible this month, and obviously the great research with Polar Bear International. But this morning I got a chance to meet someone named Ellen Kvam, and she is an incredible designer in Norway who's teamed up with Hearts in the Ice to create some signature bracelets and necklaces to help Hilda and Sunniva's celebrate their mission through the Hearts in the Ice project. So I'm going to share that little video now, and then Hilda and Sunniva, if you just want to maybe touch just briefly on kind of how this came to be.
Absolutely, and thanks. Everything we're doing up here is a labor of love. Both of us have experienced tremendous changes in the polar regions over the last 25 plus years. And so we're just like all of you on the call today, just wanting to make a little bit of a difference with our lives by pulling together experts like you, Joe, and Polar Bears International, and companies like Canada Goose and Marlink, who are helping us with satellite technology to really just spread awareness. And then we meet somebody really special like Ellen Kvam, who is in Oslo and is a designer, and she created a very special piece, a pendant, which is a symbol of community for our project, Hearts in the Ice pendant. And she just created a really cool, and we've only seen pictures, we don't even have one yet, a polar bear bracelet, because we're all living in a time of deep separateness. And if anything, it's a symbol of pulling us all together and creating and elevating conversation around not just all of us, but species that need us. So that's the little tease, and I'll let you all watch what Ellen has to say. She's a beautiful lady.
All right, here we go.
Hi, all of you Hearts in the Ice enthusiasts. I am a jewelry designer, and I come from the far northern city of Tromsø. My jewelry is inspired by nature, the northern simplicity, and by colors of the north. Hilde Strøm's interest in my jewelry is why the two of us met the first time near one of my pre-Christmas sales events almost 2 years ago. She was in a hurry and on her way to the airport in Svalbard, and as she passed me, she spotted my jewelry and she literally spun around and came over and introduced herself and her project, Heart in the Ice. Within minutes, I was on board and committed to design and produce the symbol necklace Heartbeat, and I knew immediately what to make and how to do it. The Heartbeat was well received from day one and have sold in large numbers to Heart in the Ice supporters in all corners of the world. And also on board the Hurtigruten ships, as Hurtigruten are faithful supporters of the project as well. About 6 months after having met Hilde, I met Sunniva Sørby on board MS Nordstjernen on the trip that was to take the two women from the city Longyearbyen of Svalbard and into the wilderness and the trapper's hut Bamsebu. Many of us may have a hard time wrapping our heads around that concept of living like that. So these girls are heroes, no doubt. They were working hard, and yet they found time to come up with a new idea. The project could benefit from having a signature bracelet. This time, it was not an immediate solution as far as look and design is concerned, because it was a few requirements that they had in mind for it that introduced some challenges. It should be suitable for both men and women. Only climate-friendly materials, of course. Include something to symbolize embracing the planet. Include a polar bear. It is a very cute polar bear. They needed it to include something blue, maybe a logo. Tall order. We made the bracelet in 2 versions for variety, and we are excited about the results. I am grateful and honored to be included in the team of Heart in the Ice. It's only a joy to support these accomplished women by creating products that can help them raise funds to their important project of connecting people and for them to attend to their honest efforts and role in the conversation of climate change as citizen scientists. Thank you all for your kind attention and for letting me introduce the Hearts in the Ice Heartbeat and Hearts in the Ice brand new in bracelets. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great event.
All right, very cool. Well, it was great to meet Ellen this morning, and she's so passionate about being part of the Hearts in the Ice team and sharing that message. So it was great to be able to share the work that she has been doing. So Hilde and Sunniva have joined us live in the call now. I see that buffering wheel, so maybe it might not work out, but hopefully at the end, after another question or two, we're going to try and turn their camera on so they can say just a quick hi before we go off today. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that works out for us. But let's grab 1 or 2 more questions here from YouTube. This is from Mrs. Simmons' class. So Chris wants to know, where is the biggest population of polar bears found today?
Ooh, that is a good question. Oh man, I want to say actually the Barents Sea population is one of the largest known populations. God, might have stumped me. Joanna, what do you got?
It's the same for me. It's the Barents Sea population is very well counted. So we have a good estimate of how many bears may live in Barents Sea. But it's really hard to tell since polar bears are very hard to study. and they're even harder to count. So BJ and I are both struggling to give a precise area and a precise number in those places, but it's also due to the fact that they live in such remote places and such open areas.
I think if I would add to that, so there's a few places where we know a lot about polar bears. Svalbard's one of them. Alaska is one of them. And northern Canada is where we know a lot about polar bears, because there's been long-time research. There's been people studying these bears for sometimes multiple decades, up to 40 years. And Hudson Bay in Churchill, outside of Churchill, Manitoba, is one of the best examples of that. Dr. Ian Sterling, the Canadian scientist, has studied for years and years, and his students have studied, and his students' have studied. So these are very important places, and that's how we know how many bears are in these places. It's not because we go out every year and we just stand on a hill somewhere and we count 25 bears and say there's 25 bears. It takes a long time to go out and capture these bears over again. And Joanna, you want to add something there?
Yeah, I was thinking that if we were to cheat a little, we could say that, the most polar bears are found sometimes around whale carcasses. They are extraordinary pictures of bears feasting on whale carcasses and resting around. So Jeff Fjord, who's also with Polar Bears International, he captured a photo with over 100 polar bears. BJ, do you know what was precise number of all the bears around the whale carcass there?
I don't actually, but lots and lots of bears.
It was lots of bears.
I'm getting texts from a friend, actually, from our scientists from Kamloops, and Baffin Bay and the Chukchi Sea and the Barents Sea all have the biggest population. So we're talking the United States, between US and Russia. We're talking Chukchi Sea. Oh, sorry, Baffin Bay is up in Canada, and then Barents Sea, of course, is the Svalbard population. So there you go. Thank you, Elisa. Uh-oh, Joe.
Oops, there we go. Good to be well connected with good polar bear friends.
No doubt.
One more camera question. I can see someone in Mrs. Ross's 4-5 who's been waiting nice and patiently, so we'll let you sneak another one in.
How long does it take for a polar bear to dig their den?
That is a great question. That is a great question. So looking at so we mentioned earlier that polar bears wear those telemetry collars that have different devices installed in them, and that allows us to see a polar bear's movement as well, like if the bear is moving a lot or not. So that gives us a little bit of an insight, and the digging itself, it can take a bear some good hours, like around a day to dig a den and find herself comfortable in there. They must do adjustments throughout the time that are in den, because they're much warmer than the outside temperature. So the den freezes in ice, so it seals them inside pretty well. So in order to breathe, they have to, throughout the time they're in the den, dig out a little bit and make some nice air holes. But some bears actually change their den sites. So I've seen on the data that I was working with that some bears went to a certain spot, and you can see that they have been digging a den and they've been working hard. They stayed there for a few days, and then after some time, they just decided to move to another better place and dig another den there. So it takes some time for a bear to dig a den, but it seems that it takes some time deciding where the right spot is. So it seems that there's more into making a den than just digging a hole in the snow.
All right. Well, I've got Hilda and Sunneva back on satellite phone. I'm going to give them a minute to kind of give us a last word here, but I do want to just say, Joanna and BJ, this has been so much fun. Thank you for sharing the work you're doing, those great images, and the video clips. I was pretty distracted by that one polar bear just kind of rolling in the snow, having a good time. That was really cool to see. So thank you so much for sharing all that great research and kind of images with us. But I'm going to throw things
for having us for sure today. And also looking forward to your chat with Jan Arsch next week.
Yeah, that should be great. We have another chat coming up. You've heard Jan Arsch's name come up a few times during today's event, and he's going to join us on the 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern. In fact, I'm going to share this little link here. If you head over to the Exploring by the Seat website, /polar bears, you'll see where you can kind of register to join in that event. And I also want to make sure I share this link to head over to Polar Bears International. There is so much great curriculum there and clips, and you can meet more of the team, opportunities to get out on those live casts that BJ is a part of, and obviously Joanna as well, with scientists around the world. So definitely check out Polar Bears International as well. And I want to throw things to Hilda and Sunniva. We'd love to get kind of a last word from Bamsebu.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's fantastic to be a part of all this, and for us, it's a big privilege to be so close to the polar bears in their real life, and how we see them are living outside here, how vulnerable they are, though they are so big, and for us, they're kind of frightening because they're life-threatening to us if we come in their way, but to stay on the distance and see how they're living, and also to see how they're struggling. It's both a beauty and also sort of a sad situation to see how they are. The ice is lacking, and so we just need to do, all of us try to do whatever we can to be thoughtful users and stay curious, stay involved, maybe join some citizen science program or whatever we all can do in our daily lives. And Sunniva has some words to say too. Hey, Joe, and everybody on the call. We don't know where all of you are from except the schools that joined, but there were quite a few people on YouTube Live too. So thanks for helping us build community around something super, super important. And as, the days are growing shorter, and we're all sort of in a form of hibernation right now, and we just want to encourage everybody out there to take care of each other. We need to take care of the animals, but we need to take care of ourselves first. So please, each and every one of you do that. Maybe reach out to someone who needs a little more extra care. And we'd like your wishes. We have an email, which is heartsintheice@gmail.com. And we want to take wishes that people have out there for yourself, your family, for the polar bears, for other animals. And then we'll post those on social media throughout the coming months. So take care of each other. And so much to PBI, Canada Goose, Joe, and everybody for making this happen today. You guys are all really experts in your field, and we're proud to be aligned with all of you. So thanks, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
All right. Well, a huge shout out to that YouTube crew we had today from across North America and beyond. Thank you for those great questions. A shout out to our camera classes. You guys were awesome. And right back at Polar Bear International again, BJ, Joanna, KT running things behind the scenes, and Elisa sneaking in with a little trivia knowledge there. Thank you so much for just a phenomenal event today, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
All right. We are going to sign off for today.
Thank you.